Hey everybody, how's everybody doing? This is Ryan talking from the Black Room here at T3, coming to you guys on a Sunday of all days. I had a really busy week last week, and I wanted to do a video on some trades that I took over this last week. And yeah, the weekend has been so far just as busy as well. So I hope you guys are having a good day off. We're coming into a shortened week here, and we're coming into kind of the tail of earnings season. We had Home Depot report, and as you guys know, I use Home Depot as I think they reported in the beginning of this last week. I used them as a marker towards this was their day they reported, I believe, on the 13th. I used them as a marker as kind of like the end of earnings season. So it's been a little bit of a slower week, but there was definitely still a lot of opportunity out there. I was able to take advantage of most of it really right at the open. Almost all of it, although Friday I had a nice trade that came a little bit later in the day. But there was still some opportunity in some of the pro gaps that we got. So I wanted to do a video on some of the trades that I took, kind of taking a break. And I'm going to kind of tie in some of the management that I did to the series that I started, but this is not going to be a part of the series on significant pivots because the patterns that I took and the setups that I took, I didn't manage on significant pivots, but there is a reason why. We'll talk about that briefly, and I'll also tie it into the series that I'm doing on significant pivots on why I stepped out of the significant pivot management. So these are the stocks that we're going to be looking at. Pretty much all of these, except for the MTSI, we can look at, and the Wix we can look at also. These three I took right at the open, right? So here's the info, right? So here's the trades that I took. The Tyson here, and I'll show you all the markers. Just want to make sure this is official, though. You can see I took this at 9:35. Tyson was a nice trade, which was 3.5 Rs, 4.5 Rs on the PGR, which was right at the open also, and the Wix took a stop on, just over an R here. That was a little bit later in the day. I can show you that too. The MTSI was a break-even trade, and that was a morning breakout, I believe. And lastly, the ARNA, which was right at the open, also here, right, 9:34. Okay, so most of these are right at the open, and this was just from Friday. We're not going to go over these. The VIAB mentioned in the room, and the GWN. Both of these were later though, but these two were what I took on Friday. All right, so this is what we're going to look at. I have I turned my markers on, so we can see where the entries and exits were, right? So that's what I took, and was one thing that, and this was when I switched my management, you can see here's two stops that I took. And the winners, now these were nice trades, but the winners are significantly larger than the losers, right? I mean, 3-1, 4-1, right? Somewhere around here. This one was 2.5-1. So with the new management, my winners are definitely significantly larger than my losers compared to what my trading was before. Okay, so this is part of what I'll tie into the shift in management, because I wanted to increase my R to R and take a small hit on my batting average, which I have taken. But my R to R on average has definitely increased as far as my expectancy and my edge on professional gaps. So, all right, so let's jump in here. And I just want to cover, one, you guys can see the trades that I took, and you can see the daily charts that I'm going after, because I try to be really consistent on having a picture of power on the daily chart. I try not to get distracted, and I think it was easy for me personally to get distracted with setups that weren't professional gaps or didn't have a really good larger time frame, because at the end of earnings season we're starting to not have that many professional gaps to look at. But I felt like this last week I still focused on Really nice daily charts, so you can see some consistency there, and then we'll get to take a look at some patterns right at the open. A lot of times I hear from a lot of traders that the open is really busy and a lot to look at. Things are moving quickly, and so I really kind of want to focus on drilling down on some of the real key patterns, and there's only a handful of them that I'm looking for at the open. And as you can see just on the times here, we're talking about 5 minutes into the open, 3 minutes into the open. The other one was the Arno was 1 minute into the open, right? So most of these patterns happened right away, and I think we have a pretty good variety of what I was looking at. Okay, so it's kind of my goal for this video is to capture those initial moves at the time where sometimes the busiest. Okay. All right, so let me keep the daily chart on here. Let's look at the Tyson. I think that was the first trade, right? So I'll pull up Tyson here. As you can see, this is a pro gap down. All right. Still had some support here, but really liked how we were breaking under this engulfing bar, this significant pivot here. If we pull out, look at the weekly chart, weekly downtrend. Okay, so we're triggering a weekly sell setup here, a confirmed weekly sell setup, I may add. We're in a weekly downtrend, and yeah, so you can see kind of what I'm going after. Really, all the trades. I mean, here was a trade. This was probably a professional gap. This was a professional gap. I had a short here. This was probably a professional gap up. So you can really kind of see where my trades are focused on as far as these days where I think that there's some pretty good opportunity. Okay, so here's the daily chart, and so we had the pro gap down. Hold on, I think my markers got turned off because I switched time frames. There we go. Okay, so professional gap down here. All right, now let's take a look at the 1 minute because we're going back several days. It may take me a second here. Okay, here we go. Make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so here's the pattern that I was focusing in on. Let me get my pencil out here. Okay, so we had the open here, right? Looks like there was some spread here. We had a topping tail, and pretty much the price action is a breakdown, right? Clear breakdown with 2 failed attempts to go higher. Okay, so we have 1 failed attempt here. We have a second failed attempt in this topping tail, and then we have this inside bar. Okay, so what I'm looking for is this is a breakdown here. All right, under the low of the day. We had 2 prior failed attempts to go higher. All right, now this was one of my favorite gaps on this day. And this is the key bar. Even though I love this engulfing bar here, I love this topping tail, this bar right here, this doji bar, this is the key bar for me. All right, so, and this also is really what made this a nice trade because I was able to increase my R to R. So if we look at the price action that happened here, basically this is what we got. A failed attempt to go higher, a second failed attempt to go higher, which was a little bit lower, and then we got some sideways price action here. Okay, that's what took place during this inside bar. All right, now some of this you had to kind of when I was watching the candles form here, I was watching this sideways price action where we had 1 move higher, second move, and then some consolidation here. This is this tightening here of price action where we're continuing to come down, bounce off support here, unable to move higher twice, and then we're just kind of basing at support. This is my favorite kind of breakdown here, right? So we have 2 failure patterns, and then we can't even get off the low of the day. That's what this inside bar represents, okay? So this is it's kind of like 2 topping tails, 2 failure patterns, and then a consolidation, right? So the entry was pretty clear. It was just over the whole number for me, $29. The low of the day, I believe, was $29.05. I could be a couple pennies off, but I believe it was $29.05. I ended up getting filled a couple pennies after that, which was nice because I got filled before the break of the whole number. And then the stop was right here, right above the inside bar, right? So if I like this base enough where I'm watching this and I see that price action is going back and forth, when this breaks down, I'm expecting this to go, and I'm not expecting it to return and break above this base here. Okay? If this does break above the base here, then I'm considering this a breakdown failure and I no longer want to be in it. All right? Now, this could easily reverse and come back down, but what I'm looking for is I'm looking for once I get triggered into the position, I'm looking for where to get out only if there's a failure pattern or only if the trend fails. And when I saw this price action with this inside bar, this base, that was sufficient for me to use my stop, because if it took this out, that would have been a breakdown failure for me. And the likelihood, if it took out this base, the likelihood that it would take out the high of the day is significantly higher, right? So I'm okay using this as a stop, which gives me a really tight stop and the possibility for a really nice R-to-R trade, okay? So basically just two topping tails. That's kind of what I'm considering this. We're in a base. We have two topping tails. We get an inside bar. That's where the short was, okay? So ended up covering this down here towards the lows, $57. I remember I had a buy order at 57.05. I think it went to 57 exactly. I don't know where my data box is, but I think it went to 57 exactly. The reason why I covered these, even though I'm trailing significant pivots, is at this point at $57, it was up 5 Rs from my stop. Okay, so it was 4 Rs in the money, 5 Rs from where it was trading to where my stop was because I had an R at risk. So my management says that the maximum I'm willing to take a move against me is 5 Rs, right? Which we'll get into later when I do the 2-minute significant pivot videos. All right. So I ended up initiating a trail, took some spread on this. I think it was a 50-cent stop here. Yeah, it was a 50-cent stop, and I got out, looks like half R off a low, so I ended up making 3.5 Rs, right? So just this initial move. Really nice move. Nice convicted trigger here, right? So we get a nice conviction here, nice drop lower, ended up taking it all there. And on this trade was the low of the day, right? And I'm getting out the low of the day. We're going to jump right into this PGR, which is different. Got out, and I certainly did not get out of the low of the day, right? But this was the entry pattern. Okay, let's go to the PGR here. PGR, I think, was a pretty nice gap down. Yeah, pretty nice gap down on the PGR. Breakout here. This was all-time highs. Breakout. Gap down, creating this island reversal, right? You guys know that I like island reversals, okay? So professional gap down, leaving an island behind, and I'm looking to take a short position. And I don't remember what the entry pattern was here, but we'll take a look. Here we go. Okay. Oh, yes, 1, 2, 3 pattern. Okay, so we did have this bottoming tail here. This bottoming tail still keeps the pattern intact, but I don't think that the stock was actually open if you see how little volume that it did here. But once we got this wide range igniting bar, now I know it's open, right? And you guys at this point should all really know this pattern where we get this igniting bar lower, right? This bar here, then we get an inside bar, and then a short, okay? So for me, this really is a variation of the same pattern that we saw before, right? So the same pattern that we saw before was two topping tails and then a consolidation and break lower. Well, what is this? This is an igniting move with the base sideways, right? Same thing that we see here, right? This 1 minute, we get this igniting move lower, and then we get this base sideways, right? So it's the same variation. Okay, so hopefully we're getting some familiarity with some of the patterns and price action. All right, so we get this igniting move, inside bar. I remember when I was watching this tail, we just came up, retested this inside bar, and immediately reversed, and that's when I got short. Okay, so short under the low of the day, stop above this inside bar. Now, this I believe I gave a little bit more room. Yeah, so I think this should have been like a 25-cent stop. I think, or it should have been a 20-cent stop, and I gave it 25 cents. Or maybe I gave it 35 cents. Let me see my size here. No, I gave it 25 cents. It was a 20-cent stop. I gave it 25 cents because of the spread. Again, nice trigger here. Okay, so we got a nice trigger. A little bit of reaction here on this bottoming tail, but Continued lower. We were basing sideways here. Got this base breakdown, and I ended up taking it a little bit over 4 Rs, right? So, yeah, really nice trade here. Nice move. I took it because that's what my management said. You can see that if I held a little bit longer, I captured probably what, half the move? Half the move, right? So 4 Rs was only half the move. So a lot of these patterns that they open, they really open up some opportunity to have some nice R to R trades. This was what my management said that I should do, so I did follow the plan here. If I would have trailed 2-minute significant pivots, I don't even want to tell you because we're gonna cover this when I was doing it. But if I would have trailed 2-minute significant pivots, I think it would have been a 15R trade, right? But I did not. I trailed it because there was nowhere for me to reduce my stop, and I made 4.5 Rs, right? So not complaining at all. Not complaining at all. I think it was a great trade. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. But I'm just bringing this to light because when we talk about management, because this is the worst example, or the best example, depending on how you look at it, of this last earnings season where 2-minute significant pivots really would have been a heroic play if you trailed just to that management. But getting off topic here. So that was the entry pattern, right? 1, 2, 3. We're all familiar with that pattern, and we're all familiar with an island reversal. All right, so pretty straightforward here. Okay, next, the wicks. The wicks was I think it was on the 5-minute, I believe, right? So the wicks was a professional gap down here under this green bar. And the wicks was a stop. Now, this wasn't right at the open, but since it's in that basket, I'm going to go with it. Oh, yes, this is what the wicks was. So the wicks was a gap bully that ended up failing, basing at the lows here, and got in short below this bottom, or below this topping tail once we got this breakout. Did get a nice move here, but failed, right? So ended up getting triggered into this breakdown, started to roll over, and then ended up failing. Right, so just didn't follow through. Was happy with this. Waited for this green bar, the move higher, and yeah, got everything that I wanted because I was on the mic when I played this, and just didn't follow through. Okay, so took a stop on this, but only lost an R. Didn't get crazy with it. Was like, oh, it's got to come back eventually or anything like that. The MTSI, I believe I got triggered. I got a false trigger into this. I think. No, I did not. Okay, so this was the MTSI breakout here, right? 5-minute breakout. Daily chart, professional gap up. Really like this gap up too. Just never followed through. So reverse this, base sideways, breakout. Ended up stepping out of management to kill this break even because after we got this breakout, just never really followed through. And I think I might have saved myself maybe a little bit. This is where management would have told me to get out here. But yeah, just a break even trade. This breakout, never followed through here. So I ended up getting out of it. Okay, last trade, and this one was at the open too. So the other two, one break even, one stop, and then, okay, so here's the ARNA, right? Gap right above this pivot, all these red bars, they're immediately underwater here, and this gave 2 nice entries. All right, so this is a pretty good example because we're kind of getting a nice variety here. This is a nice breakout right here, right? That's a nice pattern. I wouldn't have played it because it was the day after the gap, but really nice pattern there as we're going back. Should be here. Here we go. Okay. So we're getting a nice variety of entry patterns here. All right, so I know that this shows that I got filled below this candle here, but that was because of the spread. So the real entry was over the 1-minute bar's high, stop low of the day. Okay? So this ended up triggering me, and I ended up getting a better fill price, which is really unusual. Normally that means it's going to stop, but this did not ended up stopping. So this was the entry, just long over high of the day, stop below low of the day. We have a 1-minute bottoming tail here on a pretty nice professional gap up here. So this is pretty much the most aggressive entry that I can take. But this bottoming tail is just really simple. We opened, we ended up moving down, couldn't go lower, and then as soon as we break out here, right? So that's how we get this bottoming tail. And that was the entry, right? Long. Okay, now I explained this when I was moderating, and hopefully I don't really kind of complicate this, but okay, so I added to this and reduced my stop under this pivot here, okay? So that's where you can see this add, which was really nice. This set up really nicely. So we get this bottoming tail, right? So we get this bottoming tail, and then we get a follow through, and then we kind of get some sideways price action here, which you can see in this topping tail and in this red bar here, okay? So this is what ended up happening was everything in me wanted to kill this below this inside bar because I'm like, okay, this is turning into a breakout failure. But I was like, no, I'm going to stick with the plan. I'm not going to kill it because it's not that good of a breakout failure, and I'm just going to stick with this, okay? So we get this bottoming tail. We kind of get this sideways price action seen in these two topping tails here, and then all of a sudden we break lower here, right? We break lower, which you can see in this red bar, all right? We get this topping tail, and then we break lower. And as soon as we broke lower, we immediately reversed that, which you can see in this green bar. All right? So as soon as we immediately reverse that, well, what is this? Well, we got this move lower that failed, and then we got this really kind of sloppy buy setup here. But inside the buy setup, inside this price action, we get this kind of breakdown failure. And I know that this is hard to see, but if you're on this candle, but if you're watching this at the open, this is exactly what the price action shows here, right? And you can see it. You get this move that just kind of peaks lower, then immediately gets reversed, okay? So as soon as it gets reversed, I was able to add to it. Once we broke the prior candle's high as a buy setup entry, I was able to reduce my stop. So I doubled my size. I think I bought, so I had 300 shares initially for a 75-cent stop, and then I took another 300 shares, which typically would be a 35-cent stop for me. But because the first original 300 shares was trailed roughly break even, I was only risking like 2/3 of an R on this. But I was able to double my size after this buy setup. And the only reason that made me do this was because we got this breakdown failure. And as you guys know, breakdown failures inside of buy setups, that's my favorite entry, right? So we got a buy setup here, added to this position. It goes a little bit crazy here. This was up like $700 or something, and then immediately comes in and races, right? That did not feel too good, but I had to stick with my plan, right? Did not feel good. Sticking to the plan, base sideways, we ended up breaking higher, and then here's where I ended up taking it, right, which was right about 4 Rs. Reason being, I didn't have a 2-minute significant pivot. Even though this base sideways, this wasn't technically a 2-minute significant pivot for me. So once I was up 4 Rs and my stop was originally down here, I was 5 Rs away from my stop, and so management told me to kill it, right? Now, this is another thing that I'm going to bring up in this 2-minute significant pivot series was I really felt like I should have held this even though it was crazy. So we got a nice original trigger. We got a breakdown failure. This went a little bit wild. And once this was up nicely and then was back to break even here, I think I let my emotions get to me a little bit. So, because that was a 3.5 hour swing, right? 4 hour swing, whatever it was. And I felt like I missed the exit here. And then as soon as we broke the high of the day, this gave me an opportunity to get out where I'm supposed to, yes. But it also gave me the opportunity to kind of satisfy my emotions of locking in a nice winner. But the reality is if I was not in this trade, and I actually don't need these markers because it's the last one. So if I were to take these markers off, and if I was not in this trade, breaking above this topping tail like this and this base, everything about this price action looks higher. like everything about this says this is a really strong uptrend. And I ended up getting out. Now, I want to be clear that I did follow my plan here. So I'm not saying this is a mistake. I'm not saying I shouldn't have gotten out. But what I am saying is I'm just bringing to light the reality of when I'm in a trade, how kind of some of my emotions play a role in my decision-making process. Now, this time I was able to follow my plan and solve my decision-making process. But everything about this price action looks higher. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because there was no part of my mind that was like, this stock is going to continue higher. The only part of my thought process was, let's get out of this and let's take a winner. Right? So even though I've been trading full-time for a couple of years now, 4 years or whatever, it still kind of blows me away how if there are still small moments where I know that I'm not thinking objectively and my emotions are completely running my decision-making process. And it's crazy how blind I can be to thinking objectively just because of my emotions. But that being said, that's why I have rules, right? That's why I have a plan of attack. And that's why I got out here and I did what I was supposed to do. Right, but I was also acutely aware that in doing what I was supposed to do, my emotions were definitely running rampant here. This stock was also pretty spready, but it also did continue higher pretty nicely here, right? And I think this actually was the high here, but it did follow through after that pretty nicely. So we kind of got a nice variety here. So we got a 1 minute bars high-low. The reason why I was willing to play a 1 minute on this was because we gapped just over this pivot and we had nice shock value. Okay, so we got a 1 minute bars high-low. We got a variation of a buy setup. The TSN was a breakdown play, right, where we got the retest, consolidation, and the breakdown. So that was the TSN. And the PGR was the 1, 2, 3, right? 1, 2, 3 entry. 1 minute high-low and a buy setup with a breakdown failure in it, right? So this is a really nice basket of everything that I pretty much take at the open is a variation of all 4 of these, right? 1 minute bar, buy setup, breakdown, 1, 2, 3. Right? So everything that I take is a variation of these 4 patterns. And so that's really kind of why I wanted to share with you guys this video to see the patterns that I take. And we kind of got a nice basket of one of each. And also, they also were really nice trades, right? So we got nice follow through. Now, don't get me wrong, if they didn't follow through, I wouldn't be as thrilled about showing you guys them. But they don't all follow through, is what I'm saying. And when they do follow through, they follow through really nicely, and that's the key. My batting average is a little bit below 50%, so I'm right a little bit less than half the time. But when they do follow through, my winners are a lot larger than my losers. And these patterns put me in opportunity to take advantage of these nice moves. So just kind of wanted to go over this with you guys. I think that we'll still get some gaps the next couple of days. I'm not going to be here on Friday, but I am kind of anticipating a little bit of a slower week because of the holiday. But again, this last week was a little bit slower, but that doesn't mean that there's not some opportunity and some really nice moves to capture. Right? So let me know if you guys have any questions with these. 1 minute bars high-low, buy setup, breakdown, and 1, 2, 3. Right, so we got we got an example of each one and how they worked, how they can follow through. We also got an example of some breakouts that didn't follow through on the Wicks and the MTSI. But yeah, so let me know if you guys have any questions. Hopefully this is helpful. Try to keep it as clear and concise as possible because there's a lot of stuff that goes on at the open. But if you're familiar with these patterns, the more you look at these, the more you study them, the easier it'll be and the faster you'll be at reading them and pulling the trigger. Right? So Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. This upcoming week, I'll be back to the 2 minute significant pivot series, and we'll go from there. All right. Thanks, everybody. Look forward to seeing you guys Monday.